feel like my parents are getting a divorce. My mom is like,
I thought you loved playing Mario Kart with me.
but then my dad's like, no, he likes tinkering in the garage with me, undervolting and overclocking.
Actually, Sam is more into overcooking than overclocking. Isn't that right, sweetie?
Now, come on, Sam. If you hang out with me, it'll be just us guys being dudes, manually adjusting the TDP and wrenching around in the gyos.
Don't you mean BIOS?
See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You always have to be right. You can never just let me have this one.
So anyway, therapy is going really well and making a lot of progress. Psst. My parents said if you like and subscribe, they'll love each other for Christmas, so no pressure or anything. It's just kind of like my lifelong dream. The Switch 2 is an iPhone and the Steam Deck is Android. Enough said? No? Alright. The Switch 2 is a Gulfstream G400, sleek and smooth, whereas the Steam Deck is a fully customizable Cessna 310 with turboprops, water landing gear, and optional wing-mounted missile launchers. Missile launchers sold separately. Make more sense? Okay, good. I'm glad we got that cleared up. The biggest difference and the biggest reason that you should buy one of these handhelds over the other, and yes, I'm putting the conclusion right at the start of the video because I value your time, it's the games library. Yes, there are hardware differences, and yes, there are software differences, but neither of those come even close to the difference in what games you can play on each system. It really is as simple as this. If you like playing Nintendo games, and pretty much only Nintendo games, with the very rare exception of some bangers like Cyberpunk, Witcher 3, and Fortnite coming over, then the Switch is for you. And if you like playing literally any game other than Nintendo's, well then you can go f yourself, because Mario Kart is the best game franchise and it's the best game to ever exist. And if you don't like it, my most played games this year have been Helldivers 2, Marvel Rivals, Split Fiction, Hogwarts Legacy, Red Dead 2, God of War, and this weird-ass indie tower defense that I can't seem to get enough of called Nordhold. Out of those 7 games that I've put the most time on in the last year on my Steam Deck, 2 of them I can play on my Switch 2, Hogwarts Legacy and Split Fiction. But on the flip side, for the Switch 2, I really like Mario Kart, and I would never even dream of talking about how you could emulate Nintendo games on your Steam Deck, which is totally legal because I literally own the console and I own the games, but Daddy Nintendo has a giant legal team and they'll come straight down your throat if you... So here's the rub. Even as a giant Steam Deck fan, I know Valve is never going to move units like Nintendo does. It's just too niche of a console. The Switch 2 sold more units in the first 4 days than Valve sold Steam Decks in the first 4 years. So love it or hate it, the Switch 2 is the handheld that everyone is going to buy and everything else is going to be compared to. And I'm gonna be honest with you, it's a pretty damn good device. It does have its flaws, and battery life has been less than ideal for me. In my testing, I'm getting just under 2 hours with full brightness playing Mario Kart. And look, I'm not a Nintendo fanboy, so I'm technically allowed to say this. That sucks ass. That's worse battery life than the Switch OLED, which is dumb. But to be fair, the LCD Steam Deck, when it first came out, running my balls to the wall Elden Ring test, max brightness, max settings, all that, I got just over an hour, which sucks even more ass than the Switch 2 does. But then the Steam Deck OLED came out, and in that same test, I got about 2.5 hours, which is pretty alright, especially considering that it has a much brighter screen than the Switch 2. And speaking of screens, while I generally prefer the inky blacks and more vibrant, punchy colors of the Steam Deck OLED's OLED screen, the Switch 2's 1080p LCD is no slouch. It hits 450 nits max brightness in HDR, which isn't anywhere near the Steam Deck's 1000 nits in HDR, but it still looks pretty bright, and the 120 Hz and VRR on the Switch is straight up awesome, and it really makes me wish that the Steam Deck had VRR because it makes the gameplay look so much smoother. But the biggest thing that Nintendo got right with the screen is the size. Usually with handhelds, if you want a big screen, you gotta get a big handheld, which is worse for portability in a bunch of different ways. But Nintendo somehow managed to cram a 7.9-inch swanger of a screen into a package that's smaller in every dimension than the Steam Deck. You hear that, Ma? The Switch 2 has a bigger screen than the Steam Deck OLED, even though the deck is a bigger device. What a wild world we live in these days. Times sure are changing. But you know what's not changing? This channel's goddamn subscriber count. Only about 1% of you are subscribed, and that's just not enough to make ends meet round here. We're gonna lose the farm. Sorry about that, I don't get out much. The Steam Deck is miles more comfortable to hold because it's not as flat as a gosh dang 2x4. Oh, God, I can't stop. But here's the thing, while the deck is much more comfortable to actually hold, those chunky monkey controllers also make it a lot less portable. The Switch 2 is thinner, lighter, smaller, and because you can pop the Joy-Cons off the side, dramatically more portable. I can easily fit the Switch 2 into my backpack's tablet slot. I cannot fit the Steam Deck. I can easily fit the Switch 2 into my pocket and the Joy-Cons into my other pocket. I cannot fit the Steam Deck into my pocket. I can easily fit the Switch 2 into... Oh, and that reminds me, although there's no correlation, the haptics, aka the vibrator motors, are way better on the Switch 2. They're super tactile feeling, kind of like the iPhones, and they're used all throughout the UI, so when you're just bopping around, it makes the whole console feel much more polished and cohesive. And the Switch 2 fan makes almost no noise, just like your dad sneaking out of the house for a gallon of milk at 2 a.m. Except I heard you, Dad. Fan noise between the two in handheld mode, I haven't felt the Switch get hot. The back can get a little bit warm to the touch, but I've never noticed the heat making its way to where I would actually hold, which is the same on the Steam Deck OLED. I've never noticed any heat in my hands. But in docked mode on the Switch, it's a different story. I still have never heard the fans, but every time I take the Switch out of its dock, which has been running at 4K on my projector, but after I've been playing for a while, the whole thing is very warm to the touch. Not hot, but it is very warm. And speaking of the dock, that's another thing the Switch 2 just gets right. It's definitely not perfect. The dock itself feels really cheap. I feel like I could bend it in half by looking at it wrong. But as far as functionality goes, that doesn't really matter. It has a built-in fan, which it clearly needs because, you know, it gets hot. But I never hear the fans, which isn't something I can say about any other handheld that I own or any other console that I own for that matter. So the dock hardware is just fine, it's nothing fancy, but it gets the job done. But what makes it special is the software integration. It's just completely plug and play. You slap the Switch in the dock, pop off the Joy-Cons, and you are immediately playing your game on your TV or projector. And that might not sound like much, but what you didn't have to do is change your controller settings or change the resolution or the frame rate or HDR. It just does all of that natively in the background. Whereas the Steam Deck, on the other hand, doesn't. If you dock up your deck, you'll have to swap controller priorities, resolution, refresh rate, HDR toggles, and then after all that, most of the time, at least in my experience, the game is crashed or you have some weird screen issues because of all the changes you just made, and so usually you have to reboot the game. Now, is that the end of the world? No, it's not, but it is a hassle, and it's a hassle that just doesn't exist on the Switch. But goddamn, do you pay for that not hassle, because the games are ridiculously expensive. $80 in this economy? What are you, crazy? I bought 3 Switch 2 games right when they came out, and they totaled just over $200, which is fucking absurd. And the thing is, $80 for a brand new game is a lot of money, there's no two ways about it. But what actually hurts my feelings, is that I want to play Smash Bros. Ultimate. That is a 7-year-old game at this point, and it's still $60, which is the same price that it was 7 years ago when the game came out. Now I get it, Nintendo owns the rights and they can do whatever they want with that game, but compare that to any game on PC that's 7 years old, and I guarantee you can get it for less than half of the starting price. For some reference, the most expensive game I bought in the last year was Cyberpunk, but if you look at that purchase, I bought The Binding of Isaac, Rain World, Hogwarts Legacy, and Cyberpunk for a grand total of $62. That's 4 games, 2 of them being AAA games, for less than you could buy just Cyberpunk from Nintendo. And on the Steam Deck, you can also buy from anyone you want. CD Keys, Humble Bundle, GOG, the list goes on. Whereas with the Switch, you can only buy from Nintendo. Anyways, all this to say, Nintendo games are expensive because they aren't discounted that often. And even when they do go on sale, they don't go on that 90% off plus sale that we're so used to seeing on Steam. And that's not even to mention having to pay for online, which yes, you do have to do on the Switch. And yeah, it's only 20 bucks a year, but they lock cloud saves behind that subscription, which feels borderline criminal. On the deck, cloud saves are free. Shocker to nobody on PC. If I was going to sum up the value for both consoles, it would go something like this. The Switch 2 hardware is pretty good value. You get a dock and a Bluetooth controller via the Joy-Cons for 450 bucks. Nice. But as soon as you start buying games, the value proposition is over. Games are way more expensive and you have to pay for a subscription if you want to play online or have cloud saves. Whereas with the Deck OLED, you don't get a dock or Bluetooth controller in the box. Lame. But games are way cheaper and you don't have to pay a subscription online, so, you know, I don't think either is right or wrong or good or bad. It's just whatever works best for you. I've been a PC gamer my whole life, and so I have a solid games library on Steam, so it hurts to not be able to play those games on Switch. And I bet for people who have been a part of the Nintendo ecosystem their whole lives, they feel the exact same way about the Steam Deck. One big caveat here is that with Steam, you are not tied to the Steam Deck itself. You can play on any gaming PC or laptop or handheld PC or whatever you want from whatever manufacturer you want. Whereas with Nintendo, you're locked to whatever hardware Nintendo comes out with, and if you don't like it, Daddy Nintendo's gonna come over and he's gonna do what it. So, on paper and in person, the Switch 2 checks all the boxes for me, and for what it is, it's amazing. I actually genuinely love it. The problem for me is, most of the games that I like to play most often, you can't play on the Switch. But here's the real appeal for Nintendo consoles for me personally, and why I'll probably always have one around. When I have friends over, it happens, I swear. Almost all of my non-gamer friends are totally down to play Mario Kart or Super Mario Bros. Or games like that, whereas they would never be interested in playing something like my favorite game this year, which was Helldivers 2. Nintendo appeals in a big way to the non-gamer, and that is so much of what the Switch 2 magic really is, that anyone, and I mean basically anyone, can pick up a controller and enjoy playing Mario Kart almost immediately. And that magic is something I don't think the Steam Deck will ever have, or at least not until Valve releases Half-Life 3. Alright, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching the whole thing. Let me know which console you prefer in the comments. I'll be down there replying as much as I can to each and every one of you. See y'all in the next one. Peace. I can easily fit this. God damn it, I don't know how to do that accent.